This is the story of two friends from college who came up with a crazy idea of inviting the greatest thinkers on earth to prove God in just 500 words. They didn't expect to get any responses, but they did. Ambassadors, senators, movie stars, captains of industry, scientists, media personalities, and more. They put 70 one-page essays in a book, which became a bestseller on Amazon, called Elevator Pitches for God.
Friends, we have an incredible podcast today. We have on author Gerald Schroeder, who wrote one of the essays in the book Elevator Pitches for God, Proving God in Just 500 Words. We also have a guest host today, which is one of my dear friends, Dr. David Porush. Dr. Schroeder is a brilliant nuclear physicist. He goes back decades. He told us he has witnessed atomic bombs exploding, but he can't tell us where, or he'd have to kill us. Dr. Schroeder highlights how scientific discoveries lead to belief in a creator. They also delve into the significance of the Big Bang, near-death experiences, the intricate relationship between the brain and environment, how consciousness may be a result of quantum mechanics, the controversial multiverse theory, the notion that the universe is designed for complexity, and much more. We're also going to hear how the war in Israel has affected Dr. Schroeder and his family. Look, I know my head was spinning as I eavesdropped on this podcast. I'm sure you're going to get blown away. Get ready. Buckle your seatbelt.
Dr. Schroeder, it's just an honor to be able to speak to you.
The honor. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, David, with me, and for you, it's a pleasure. So
Well, two fellow techies. Two fellow techies.
Yeah, and how it seems to have changed a bit. I don't know how the students can stand it now. It's a horror.
Yeah, it's all of academia, and all of academia has turned, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I doubt if when Hamas made its attack, I don't think it had a dream that it would have such an impact on the world. I mean, they've literally. And so really going one step before our failure, our being in Israel's failure of taking them seriously before the attack. It wasn't like we didn't.
Yeah, we knew.
Did exactly what they did in 1970. Oh, there can't be another war at this in 1970 or it's 1973 or 71. I don't even remember so many wars. Anyway.
We knew, Israel knew exactly what Hamas was doing, and they let it happen. It became a giant booby trap with their own citizens as innocent bystanders. And we let it happen, Israel let it happen, and this was the results. But I'm optimistic. I think as dark as October 7th was, it galvanized and made clear who stands where. And that allows us to rectify it. I didn't want to talk politics, but how are you doing in all of this, Dr. Schroeder? You live in Israel, so it's very close to you.
We have 3 kids in the army. Well, actually, it's quite bizarre because we had a son and his son. You know, we had a son and a grandson, which was his son at the same time in the army. Now, this one finished his service, but you know, the father goes in and the son is in at the same time because of so many reserve soldiers. The father's obviously, we call it Miloim, in the reserve army, and but they were all called up. So we still have I can't talk about what they're doing because of the nature of what they're doing, but there are 2 of our kids in the army at the moment.
Well, you're used to keeping secrets. You witnessed how many atomic explosions and...
Yeah. Yes, I was going to say before the recording, I was going to say, please, I have seen quite a few atomic bombs detonated. Do not ask me where I've seen them. That was what I wanted to say before we got on the program. Don't ask me where I've seen them, okay?
Ask you. Now, as long as we're on the secret part, I'm going to warn you, I'm going to ask you in advance about the top U.S. agency that wanted to speak to you about one of these matters concerning science and God and the existence of the Almighty?
Yeah, that was the NSA.
The NSA.
That was the National Security. Yeah, that was amazing. I mean, and what was amazing was the reaction of the people afterwards. Like the talk went on and the discussion, but then on the side when it was just with one on one, and no one else listening, the way they opened up on this absolute certainty, not feeling. I'm not saying they had the numbers that there is in fact a mind active in the universe that is separate from anything physical, a metaphysical mind, and that also lets us link into it. So sometimes it isn't just a coincidence, oh, I was just that. Often you say, I was just thinking of you. I'm not that type of thing. But this idea of interpersonal communication that's not physical.
So let's back up for the sake of our audience. Let's put a little frame around it. The NSA calls Dr. Schroeder up to talk to him about the fact that there is a mind that informs the universe, partly because Dr. Schroeder is the world's leading expert in theorizing and proving, or at least showing incontrovertibly, that this must exist. But what is their interest?
Oh, serious?
Well, for the sake of our...
You tap into that mind. If you can tap into that mind, you control the world.
So their interest is somewhat to weaponize this.
I want to be more benevolent, let's say, to pacify this. But, like I say in the introduction, I think of just the Big Bang. Unilateral disarmament would be a recipe for world war. Well, if every other country is trying to tap into this mind, I hope the guys that are on our side of the wall are also tapping into this, trying to tap into them. I do not know. I'm not part of that loop, and you'll have to make it clear after a few years and etc. And there's more clear that I was staying where I am now and not coming back to the States. I'm not in that loop any longer. But at the time there was an absolute, I'll call it like a race, if you want to put it this way, to find out how to, if it is possible, and then do it, to tap into this universal mind, which I think, my opinion is, it doesn't matter my opinion, but my opinion is it certainly does exist.
Well, who knew that studying physics and the mind of God would make you into Captain America, the secret weapon to give us the ability to enforce world peace?
That's because God works in mysterious ways, and it all comes down to the same answer. So.
Well, I wanted to begin by quoting you back to yourself. You write in The Science of God that the great schism between science and religion of the past 500 years may at last be narrowing. And I would go further, because you're one of the guys, and probably the champion of that narrowing. You're bringing science and religion together when, as you point out, most of the culture believes that they're somehow opposed to each other.
Yeah, somehow, yeah.
It's always, I'm sure, watching atomic bombs, you're familiar with technical difficulties.
That's the opening to Genesis and the Big Bang. Yeah.
That's it. So you say that the gap is narrowing between science and religion. And I would go further and say, not only are you the champion of that narrowing, but you have single-handedly brought it together. And in your later books, you say something even stronger. You say something, if I could put it in my own words, science is becoming a doorway, a route to belief in a creator. Science, I say this to my friends, it's being dragged, or it's dragging itself, sometimes kicking and screaming, into the doorway of acknowledging that there's metaphysics behind the physics. As you say,
That's a nice way of saying it. Thank you. I'll quote you on that.
the physical and the metaphysical make up a single reality. You say that in your later book, God According to God, which is a real chutzpah title, isn't it?
It was, I wasn't reading, I was only using the Bible. That's what I'm pleased.
So imagine you're sitting down with a scientist and you're trying to narrow this gap or drag him or her into the room of acknowledgement that there's something else going on. Where would you begin?
Existence. Why is there existence? We just take I mean, how many people have said the following before me, but I'll say it anyway. Well, there's a huge echo, by the way, here. By the time you get old enough to think about why there is existence, you've been existing so long that you don't ask the question any longer. But the fact is, the major thing is, why is there existence? Anything, not life. That's too complete. Anything. Why is there space?
Why, as you point out, a Scientific American article asked the question in the 90s, why is there something and not nothing? Why is there anything? So our mere existence is the place to begin the conversation with a scientist, but he's a skeptic or she's a skeptic, and she says to you, yeah, but so tell me more.
I would then I would have the chutzpah to say, well, look at how science describes the creation, and then I would go to my 5-minute and 28-second video that has almost 4 million views, and say that NASA's description of the creation of the universe is a spot-on description of the Bible description of how God creates the universe. It's spot on. A force that is not physical predates existence, which means it's outside of time because it predates everything. To have a force that's not physical, that exists prior to the universe, which means it predates our concept of time. Because you have to say concept because it predates would make sense. Not physical, predates the universe, predates our concept of time, creates the universe, the physical universe, from absolute nothing physical. Creates the physical universe from something not physical. That's how the Bible says God creates the universe. A force that's not physical, that's outside of time, outside of our universe, creates the physical universe from something from the non-physical. Creates the physical from the non-physical. That's NASA. They call it a quantum fluctuation, which was Ed Tryon. The poor man went to his grave. He first published this. I really have to make this because it really pains me, but it's so sad. This man, Ed Tryon, brilliant mathematician, but not from one of the super universities. Maybe that's a blessing these days, but in any event, in 1973, he presents a theory that you can create the universe from nothing physical, provided you have the laws of nature, namely quantum physics and relativity. And he publishes it in the journal Nature, which means it's the broad way. And he gets almost no credit for it. You have to search to find his name. He was spot on correct. NASA now, in its famous diagram of the creation of the universe, the force at the beginning of the universe, it shows the beginning, bing, bing, bing. What's the force? Quantum fluctuations, namely acts of nature, forces of nature.
So people say there was nothing before the Big Bang, but there had to be something, and that thing is the laws of nature itself.
Exactly.
The laws of nature, and this other perturbation, this little disturbance in the fabric of tohu and bohu,
Yeah.
which is a quantum fluctuation. What is a quantum fluctuation?
Uh,
In 5,000 words or less. No.
yes. I, I, I can't. There's a wonderful commentary on the Talmud. It's about almost 4 or 5,000 pages long. It's called the Talmud. In about page 10 of the 5,000 words, there's it gives the exact answer that I can give you. Teach your tongue to say, I don't know.
It's but
Mm.
but these
I can't even tell you what sound is. We hear sound. Where's the sound? There's no sound in your brain. There's no sound out here. The universe is silent, but we hear sound.
so this ability to talk to scientists and show them something that they have to admit against maybe their own training or the kinds of canons of academia where it's just not fashionable to admit that there's something else going on. You have an actual case study where you convinced a philosopher that influenced me, Anthony Flew. He was probably the greatest philosopher of the 20th century, or one of the greatest philosophers, and he made his career on atheism, on proving rigorously and logically that there was no God, and yet your work persuaded him that there had to be an almighty creator. Could you recap that great story?
For that, I am highly beholden to a wonderful man who lives in Dallas, Texas, Roy Varghese, who wrote some books called The Wonder of the World, which I recommend. Is similar to mine. And Roy, out of his own pocket, contacted Anthony Flew. I want to position Anthony Flew, as you said how important he was. When his essay on the proof that there could not be a God was the most widely quoted essay for 50 years, 50 years, for 50 years in any field of philosophy. David, as you know and I know, you write a paper, you go home, you write, you pat on the back, lovely, but if no one quotes the paper, it makes you feel good, but it doesn't do you anything academic or the world. His was the most widely quoted paper in any field of philosophy for 50 years on proof that there wasn't a God. And then he made the mistake. I didn't, it wasn't because of me, because Roy, this Roy, magnificent human, Roy Varghese, showed him my books. Roy showed him his books also. And then Roy got us together. And there's a wonderful, wonderful hour-long video called Has Science Discovered God? Has Science Discovered God? In which Jerry Schroeder and Anthony Flew essentially debate for about 45 minutes. And it draws Flew quite into not just that there's a God. There's many people accept the God. The real question is God active in the world? I think many persons will say, oh, maybe there was a God that created the universe, but then he's out to lunch now. He's not. But the key then is to drag from a deistic God that just sits at the creation into a God that's active in the origin of the design of the universe and the origin of life. And Anthony said, his words were, I follow the school of Socrates. I go where the truth leads me. And when he came out and accepted the fact, publicly, and he wrote a book about it as well, but publicly announced that he had erred. And then, I mean, it's nice for me, but it did get me a bunch of very nasty emails coming in that Gerald Schroeder and Roy Varghese convinced him from showing him the data that he'd never known existed. He was an atheist from ignorance. He just didn't know the nuances of the universe.
So let's talk about the courage that it took him to admit after 50 years that he was wrong, number one. And number two, that if he had been living in our Twitter sphere he would have been subjected to more hate mail and trolling. And he did. Even in academia in those days with snail mail and publications, he received more vituperation and hate because he was the most public convert. The most public convert from atheism to belief.
Yeah. There's a Hebrew word called asmarta, a hook. He was the asmarta, the hook on which tens of, I don't know how many thousands of people hung their atheism. You know, if it's good enough for Anthony Flew, it's good enough for me. I can be an atheist. And suddenly the hook disappears. And yeah, what you just said is absolute. It's just, he was pilloried. I was pilloried. I duped him. I tricked him. But it was so significant that the New York Times magazine on Saturday or Sunday, whichever day there were, the big weekend edition of the New York Times magazine had it on the cover, and which was really like the Broadway of news, and the nine-page article, I don't know, 70-page article on Flew's conversion, or how we should say it. I don't like the word conversion. Is enlightenment. They see that Baal Tshuva.
Yeah, he was a Baal Tshuva, a return, a master of the return, which implies that you return to something more true and more natural. There's something that is your more aboriginal state. And the aboriginal state of human beings might be belief and credence in a higher power. So I want to pick up on two things that you said. They're two very different things. One is the idea that science acts like a church, and its treatment of Anthony Flew is exactly like a church might act in banishing a heretic. That's number one. So could you talk a little bit about how science acts like a church of credence and belief in its own faith that there is no metaphysics? That's number one. And number two, the idea of an active God. Because a deist says, well, God was a great watchmaker and set the laws of nature in motion with a quantum fluctuation. There was a big bang, but then he just sat back, or she sat back, the Almighty, and watched it happen. But you're saying that there was clear evidence of the activity of an almighty interferer in the daily events of existence. So those are two different strings. You can follow any one you want.
Well, I think in the book by Richard Dawkins, The God Delusion. Okay, it's because you can get it on. It's for free now on digital. You can search for different words. You don't have to read the whole book, like luck, luck. He uses luck for the origin of life. There are three cases. I don't remember. I just use the most important one. A stroke of luck. In other words, there's no understanding, even among the atheists of atheists, how to describe the origin of life. And Dawkins uses, it was a stroke. It was a stroke. It was a stroke of life. 6 words. It was the origin of life is described in 6 words, and then it goes to something else. A stroke of luck. So you know what luck was also here. I think you probably see. Let's see. Where are these? What do I have here? I just didn't see it. Okay. I had it before when following the Gulf War. Following the Gulf War. Oh, here. This will show up. I don't know. Can you read the words of this?
As why were Scud casualties so low? I assume I can't see the last word.
Yeah. Why was Scud casualties so low? Now that's in the journal Nature. Now they're referring to the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, and where were the casualties so low? In Israel. Now, this is the journal Nature. You realize, as you know, or maybe never. It may be that not everyone watching realizes that the two major science are the journal Science and the journal Nature. Nature's in the UK and Science is in the United States. Why were they so low? 30 missiles landed in the Holon general area, the most densely populated part of Israel. There were no direct, there may have been one direct kill, but with the newspapers, there were none. What's the explanation of the statistical study? Because he did a statistical study, because these missiles were known, these are scouts. And the war between the cities, between Iran and Iraq, it's identical, when they were killing each other off, when Iran and Iraq were fighting before this Gulf War. So we knew the kill rate for this distance, because there's similar distances, etc., buildings, etc. And it was so, thank God, it was so, there was only one, if there's even one, that's a question. But in any event, the statistic showed that it couldn't make sense. It should be, God forbid, at least 2 orders of magnitude higher than the one. So what's the example? And David, I'll tell you, in all the years that I've read statistical studies in science, and I'm showing you, I've never seen the reasoning behind the statistic that tells you the reason for the statistical variation was LUCK. Look, you will never, I can guarantee you, in the journal, find another statistical study that will say, well, it was just luck. But that the reason that the journal Nature says there were so few casualties, I say thank God, was luck. 3 places, luck.
Yeah. So when we talk to atheists, we're used to hearing, if we get them to narrow down their arguments to the finest points, we're used to them saying something like the universe is just stuff and coincidence. It's just a bunch of material stuff that's being moved around, and it's all accidental statistical collisions or interactions. And it can't be that the world is just stuff and coincidence. So you've proved that the statistics of the origin of life or the convergence of similarities in different species is so extraordinary. I think in one of your books you say it's like throwing a dart from one side of the universe and hitting a bullseye in a room a universe away.
On the other side of the universe.
The other side of the universe.
Yeah, that wasn't my calculation. I think it might have been, who was Cosmos? But, and yeah, I mean, you just see the beauty of it. But then the argument is then, but it's, it's by chance. And then you have all these experiences also just on these near-death experiences. Now it's interesting, in the Torah, in the Hebrew Bible, every death that is described in detail, not all of them are, but some are. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, some of them are. The person dies, he's gathered to his people, and then he's buried. The sequence is always the same. The gathering to the people isn't the bones being put in the crypt, because in those days, you had a crypt and many people in the same bunch of bones together. Dies, gathered to his people, and then buried. Now, what's the gathered to his people before the burying? With Jacob, who dies, and he's gathered his people about 3 or 4 months before he's in the burial crypt. I just see that as a near-death experience without the end, the death experience. But there have been so many. I would not use as my instructor for God the near-death experience, but I think the near-death experiences are true. My Aunt Gert, a very simple person, she had never heard of near-death experience. She lived in Brooklyn. She's rest in peace. Never a big trip for her to go to the Catskills, maybe holidays, something like that.
That's where we went. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were, Grossinger's. And then the Conqueror. And in any event, they gave her the wrong medicine. She died in the operating table. She died and resuscitated her. she tells me, this is, you're getting it secondhand because she told me this. She said, I had the craziest dream. They didn't tell her she died. Could be legal. Who knows this because it's legal, and then they didn't tell her she died. Later she learned that she died from other, documents that she had the strangest dream. I met my brother Georgie, my uncle George, of blessed memory, her brother, and she met her sister, of blessed, my aunts, all of her siblings, and my grandmother, her mother, my grandmother. They all came and they were speaking with her, and and then they said, "But you got to go back."
She was gathered unto her people.
Maybe I'm just a sucker, but I believe those near-death experiences are actual near-death experiences. There's so many of them.
So if I were a scientist interrogating you and I'm skeptical, I would ask, how exactly would that work? How exactly would our consciousness, or what we call the soul, our neshama, survive after death? And if so, where would it go?
Okay, so I would first start off by paraphrasing, because I don't have it right in front of me, a George Wald Nobel laureate who gets the Nobel Prize for discovering the role of vitamin A in vision. And vision is so intimately connected with consciousness. They spent a lot of his life trying to understand consciousness. And he starts off his life as a complete skeptic. He says, you don't need God, it's all by chance. But he gets deeper and deeper into these studies of the functioning of the eye. And he finally says, I wish I had the quote right in front of me because it's such a brilliant quote. It bothers his scientific sensibilities, but it appears to him from all of his studies, is the Nobel laureate, that mind is basic to the universe, and it is mind that has created the universe. It is not that mind has developed from within the universe. The mind is the basic substrate of the universe. Now there's others I don't have it for. Heisenberg says the same thing. Schrodinger says this. Schroeder, we dropped the answer. Schrodinger says there are about 3 or 4 scientists who have Nobel laureates in the workings of the universe that have drawn the conclusion that there's one. You can't take a picture of it, so you can't prove it. But all of the conclusions that they draw, Wald said it so perfectly. It has occurred to me lately, and I must confess with some problems with scientific sensibility, that both the problems, the origin of the universe and the origin of life, conscious life arising from the origin of life from inert matter, and the origin of consciousness arising in this life that arose from inert matter, can be brought to some degree of congruence. And that is with the assumption that mind, M-I-N-D, mind, has always been present in the universe. It is mind that has given birth to the universe. I mean, these people have spent their life studying the physics of the universe, and it is their conclusion that mind is the answer. And that, of course, matches perfectly with the theological understanding that there is a universal mind. Of course, then you get back to NASA now, and that an interesting work, tiny bit of work I did with them on that.
It's terrific. And the question is, if mind is the substrate, is the premise for everything in the universe, then I think you quote Teilhard de Chardin's famous remark, we are not physical beings having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. Or John Lennon says, I'm not afraid of death. It's like getting out of a car and getting into a taxi. That the continuity for our perception of existence is mind, is consciousness, and the sense of a spirit. But again, I'm gonna interrogate you just a bit without any disrespect. those are scientists who, after long and storied careers, came to the same conclusion that we have. And I have to say, personally, I was dragged kicking and screaming into the same conclusion against all my training and all the things I had been rewarded for: rationality, skepticism, atheism. But scientist testimony isn't the same as a kind of scientific approach to, again, asking, how would that work? How would the actual consciousness persist after the death of the body if the mind is in the brain and the brain dies? Where does the mind go? How does it inhere in reality?
The mind was never part of the brain. The mind is totally separate. And the Eccles, I don't know if you pronounce his name, but Eccles says it perfectly. The mind uses the brain. Eccles is a neurophysicist, surgeon. I don't know if it's a very long name. It was neuro and physics and surgeon. Anyway, the mind uses the brain to carry out the desires of the mind. Because the mind uses the brain. The brain is the machine, is the motor in the car that makes your arms do this, that, and the other thing. But the mind doesn't do that. The mind needs the brain to do that. So the mind interacts with the brain. Is there a Olaf Blank found a location in the brain when it's stimulated, it produces this out-of-body experience. If that is the mind. Now, Blank does not believe that there's a mind, and from all the papers I've read by him, but he's a major neurosurgeon, neurophysicist, and then he's highly published, Blanke, Olaf Blank. He's in the field. He's the top or near the top, and he has located a location of the brain when you stimulate it. You access your out of body. Published that in the journal Science when he discovered it about a decade and a half ago. He does not. I make it clear. He does not think there's a mind separate from the brain, but he did find that you could force your brain to feel that you were outside your body. Okay, so is that hallucination? We know you can trick your brain to think there's light. You just have to stimulate the visual cortex. You can trick your brain to hear, if you're hearing sound, stimulate the audio. You can trick the brain to hear things or see things that don't exist by they're called hallucinations. But they do exist, right? The sound, there's noises going. So the fact that he finds a place in the brain which, when stimulated, induces a feeling out of your body. I find a place in the brain when stimulated, I hear sound, even though it's silent. But I also know that if I clap my hands, that same part of the brain interacts because there's sound waves. I know I can stimulate a part of my brain that induces vision, light, even though it's pitch black. But I also know if I shine light on my eyes, the same part lights up. So you got parts of your brain that are the same. And for taste on the tongue, it smells, etc. There are parts of the brain that exist that are built there to analyze to make you aware of what's going on outside. Because that's where the brain is there to keep you alive. So you have different parts of the brain that we know interact with parts that are outside of you, like sound waves, like smell, like garlic molecules in the air or whatever. Okay. And then we find a part of the brain, and we know that we can stimulate them. I smell garlic, but there's no garlic here. But you've hit the neuron that hits it. So we know there are these parts of the brain that exist that are sampling inputs from the environment outside of you. We know they exist. Now suddenly he finds a part of the brain that reacts, makes you hallucinate a view outside of you. Well, I can make you hallucinate light in a dark room by stimulating the visual cortex. I can make you hallucinate sound in a silent room by stimulating the auditory cortex. So these systems exist to sample the outside world. The question is, why would the brain keep that part of you that samples a mind outside of you if it doesn't exist? We already know from Rebecca Sachs, she's a tech, well, she was a tech at least a half a decade around, or a decade around, in the mind brain studies, and she documented that children that are born blind, okay, here, but this part of the brain wasn't damaged, but for some reason the eyes, you get retrofitting, blind, and the visual cortex is gradually taken over by sound. Or the brain is, because the brain's aggressive. It doesn't want to waste space. Okay, the eyes don't work. Sorry, let's use that part now to improve sound. And she finds that within a few years after birth is retrofitting. A child born, again, as they say, or can't hear, so the auditory part is taken over by vision, and the brain is aggressive. It's her work. She has no indication of mind brain in her writings, but it's very clear. She's 100% in the writings I read materialist. It's all meat and potatoes.
Yeah, the brain abhors a vacuum.
The brain abhors a vacuum of use. Yes, abhors a vacuum of use, and if it's not being used, you don't lose it. It just gets used for something else. It's not like use it or lose it. Well, you lose that function, but you get the function but that part of the brain is still you. So why didn't the brain take over the part of the? Why didn't the brain take over the part of the brain that's related to this outside of you? Why does it? If there is no really outside of you, so why does? I'm just pointing to the place where, if you draw your giant, you find where Olaf Blank found this location. Why would the brain keep that? It wouldn't keep it. It would have used it for something else. So Olaf Blank is from every paper I've read is 100% materialist. So I'm not laying that on him, but he is the person that published in Nature a part of your brain that is sensitive, that when sensitized, makes you be conscious of a you outside of you.
That's wonderful. So I'd like to take a stroll with you through two parts of your own thinking that just flash out like a beacon from a mountain, or two mountains, and I'd like to traverse those two mountains. One of them is quantum mechanics is there at the beginning of creation, and it's also the paradigm in our own thinking that has brought us to much of these recognitions that the world isn't causal, that there had to be something in the mind of an original creator. But I'm also wondering if you think quantum mechanics is involved in this ability of something material, the brain, to tune into the universal mind. Let's call it that neutrally. Do you think quantum mechanics is there working in the brain?
Well, for sure, it's there. It's working everywhere, so it's working as a computer. But is it the essential link? Look, it's only I'm not being, even saying it modestly, because obviously it's only my opinion. I think there are aspects of the quantum world that make it much easier to understand a you outside of you, a physical and metaphysical existence, which is you. It's the you that you don't see in the mirror. It's the you that is really the you. So I think our understanding of some of these paradigms in the understanding the more fundamental aspects of physics I think they do for you, David, also. Make it, I'm probably slapping this onto you, but I think for sure that
I'll take it.
Yeah, make it. But before these discoveries, it was very strongly theory. Now it's only moderate theory and at least it has, I use the word again, a basis on which to rest the idea that there is mind separate. There's metaphysical mind separate from the physical brain and separate from the physical body. Now, what happens to this mind? Look, with these near-death experiences, apparently the mind may be eternal. I mean, each person at the birth may be. Aunt Gert recognized my Uncle Georgie, her late brother. I mean, I've spoken with many other people. This is flesh, flesh and blood relationship, and she had no idea. She had never heard of near-death experience.
So let me go down another byway of quantum mechanics. And you show this pretty clearly. One of the consequences of quantum mechanics is that it's so hard for the simple materialist causal scientist to believe in, because it suggests that there's something else going on, that science has invented these articles of faith, almost like a church, in order to preserve its idea of the universe as explainable by old means. And here's where I'm getting to. It's invented the idea of the multiverse, or you call it the macro universe. It's become an almost cartoon idea. And here, let me just read what you said to describe this incredible belief. You wrote that it's as if an infinite and turbulent sea has an infinite number of bubbles, always forming every second, and each of those bubbles is itself a universe. And some bubbles bud and give rise, kind of burp, to other bubbles, which are also universes. But only one of these bubbles is our universe. And this is an idea that is so much embraced by science. It's an absurd idea. It means that every time there's a quantum event, which is happening an infinite number of times every second, there's another universe spawned. And yet, this is a fundamental article of faith of science. So much so it's become a Marvel comic credence. There we go. Parallel universe, infinite number of Earths. I've read many science fiction stories.
Yeah, notice the journal.
The Scientific American, right.
And here is the reason infinite Earths and parallel universes really exist. No question. Now here's I get my glass, so I actually read it here. This is the argument for the parallel universe, and it's still the same argument. Cosmologists, here, the evidence. Here, I'm reading. I'm not cheating. Because you see the word evidence? This is the word evidence. Cosmologists infer. Notice, David, not really now, infer. So there's a little backpedaling. Infer the presence of level to parallel universes by scrutinizing the properties of our universe. These properties, including the strength of the forces of nature and the number of space-time dimensions, and they diagram them very beautifully to show how they overlap. Cosmologists infer the presence of parallel universes by scrutinizing the properties of our universe. These properties, including the strength of the forces of nature, the number of observable space-time dimensions, were established by random processes during the birth of our universe. Yet they have exactly the values that sustain life, that suggest the existence of other universes. With other values. The fact that our universe is perfect, it's embarrassing. This is supposed to be science. Yet they have exactly the values that sustain life. That suggests the existence of other universes with other values. The fact that our universe is perfect suggests other universes. I mean, do you realize my problem with keeping a straight face on this? And of course the problem is the statement that they were established by random processes. These properties were established by random processes of the birth of the universe. Excuse me.
It's all stuff and coincidence.
Yeah, but so our universe. So why do we know there are other universes? Because our universe is perfect.
The point being, and it makes us laugh because science isn't even aware of how much it contorts itself, or it will not admit how much it contorts itself to embrace a belief that is just as far-fetched as a belief in God in order to preserve its so-called rationality. It really has invented a whole set of other beliefs. I mean, string theory was equally absurd. And it has invented these beliefs in order not to grant the fact that there's something metaphysical, even by its own operation, is being proved to work in the universe. It's a hilarious situation.
It's exactly what you're saying.
Is there a single shred of evidence for the multiverse?
Oh yes, our universe is perfect. Therefore, there must be other not perfect. I mean, I'm saying this as a joke. No, I think there's none, because you can never see outside of your universe. It would still be your universe if you could see if there is even an outside of the universe.
So, in other words, science has posited as absurd an idea that requires just as much faith in order to embrace it as they accuse people who are religious and believe in believing in God.
Yeah, except for the fact that, oh, excuse me, I jumped in.
Go ahead, please.
Except for the fact that the persons that what atheism cannot deal with is why is there something rather than nothing. Not that Stephen Weinberg, who is a huge, wonderful guy, wonderful heart, really loves humanity, etc. I pointed out to him he was part of the problem that there are too many Jews that are Nobel laureates. So and he's one of them. So but he's the person that says even when he answer all the problems, we're going to still be stuck with the really basic one. Why is there something rather than nothing? Yeah, why is there? I mean, the basic question, David, is why is there existence? I mean, isn't that a basic question?
Absolutely. Existence itself suggests the existence of a greater hand in all our doings. So you say the universe, one other track, and then we'll head towards a conclusion, but one other track you said, and it made me laugh out loud. I think my drink came through my nose when I read it. You said, to this observer, it seems the universe is a put-up job. What did you mean by that?
Maybe it's actually there so that, in fact, if you look deeply enough, you can't miss the fact. If you're willing to look deeply enough into the world, you can't miss the fact that it is a put-up job, that the universe is designed. It comes right. I had to give a talk a few years ago with it, and I started to say what I'm about to say. Every one of you knows an atom is made up of a very heavy nucleus and almost a gossamer electrons. If it weren't made that way, you wouldn't have molecules. If electrons, which amazingly have the identical charge as a proton, but they're almost 2,000 times less massive, but they have the identical charge. If they weren't so light, they couldn't jump from one, I'm using simple term, from one atom to another to form a molecule. No molecules, no light. The universe is a put-up job. It's made for complexity from its very beginning. The universe is designed for complexity from its very inception.
Would you say that its purpose is to unfold this complexity, that there's progress in the universe, it's built into the universe?
Is it our job to unfold this complexity? Did I hear that? Did I hear that correct? I'm sorry.
The purpose of the universe, kinds of intrinsic in the universe, is this urgency to unfold the greater complexity, the greater intelligence, the greater wisdom that's in it, that inheres in it.
Well, I would just say the universe is designed for complexity. Whether it's the purpose.
To quote Einstein, or at least it's alleged that Einstein said, and it's almost a cliche, he said, there are two ways to live your life, as if nothing is a miracle or as if everything is. And I have to say, your entire career since MIT has been not only writing about the fact that everything's a miracle, but also it's pretty apparent living your life in appreciation of how miraculous existence is. And I want to say on a personal note, you've given me a lot of joy to recognize that these two strains in our existence, the secular and the belief parts, are brought together. You've reconciled. And when we look back, I really believe in the 21st century, there's going to be this great convergence, as you put it, and you're going to be the figure who, starting in the 20th century and into the 21st century, made this happen, made science, dragged science into the house of belief. So let me quote something that you wrote again. You write, might it be, as Einstein and Ben Gurion concluded, they had a conversation, that and these were two non-believers, or at least they didn't affiliate with any recognizable acknowledgement of the existence of a God. They met in Israel and they concluded, quote, that an ingenious coherence transcends and joins all aspects of existence in the scientific maze we call our universe. Gerald, you're a poet. You say, let's look at the universe and see if we can see hints of a transcendent creator active in the creation. If we do, maybe we can capture the all too rare rush of joy when we chance upon the transcendent. It's so beautiful.
Did I write that?
You wrote
Oh,
you wrote that. It's going to bring tears to my eyes. But this is exactly what I get, and I hope everyone listening to this, the 12 or 1,200 who get to hear this, that they will read your books and get the sense of joy that comes not only from seeing the transcendent in the world, but also reconciling two parts of our intellect that our culture has spent the last 500 years pulling apart. So I really want to thank you, Dr. Schroeder. I want to thank you just for putting the effort and the brilliance you have into making this happen for all of us. Thank you for your time today, too.